Hi there, in this video we are going to learn about law of sines. So what is the law of sines? So previously when you've been dealing with trigonometry, so sine, cosine, tangent, you've been using it with right triangles and solving for sides and angles. So the law of sines now allows you to use any type of triangle. It does not have to be a right triangle to solve for sides and angles in a triangle. And we're going to use law of sines under two circumstances. We're going to use it when we have two angles in any side. In other words, our angle side angle or our angle angle side. And we can also use the law of sines when we have two sides and the opposite of one of the given sides. This would be known as the side-side angle case. And we're going to talk about this in also another video called the ambiguous case. But that one will be a separate video from this because it's a tinge more complicated. So don't worry about that quite yet. Okay, so we're going to talk about basic law of sines in this video. So what does the law of sines say? Here's the formula. The formula says we're going to take the sine of the angle over the side. So sine of angle A over side A equals side of angle B over side B, I'm right here, and side of angle C over side C. And I just wanted to note, if you haven't learned this already, when we name angles and sides, I'm going to zoom in over here, that an angle and a side are related in their naming. So we know that angles are all given names in capital letters and sides are given names in lowercase letters if we're just using a single letter. So we could say that this side down here is side BC, but because it's across from angle A, we're going to call it side little a or just A. But I say little a so that I can tell if I'm talking about a side or if I'm talking about an angle. This side, whoops, let's do this. This side over here, because it's across from angle B, would be side little b. And then this side over here, because it is across from angle C, would be side little c. So that's how we name our sides. It's based on whatever angle it's across from. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're going to use the law of sines to do what we call solve the triangle, which means to find all the missing pieces in the triangle. So a triangle has three sides and it has three angles. And in order to use law of sines, you need three pieces of information. So we have to find the missing three pieces of information. So when I do this, I will be honest, I don't ever remember, well, am I looking for side-side angle or angle-side angle or angle-angle side, depending on the information they give me. Here's what I do every time so I don't have to remember if the law of sines is going to allow me, or if my problem is going to allow me to use the law of sines. So here's what I do. Every problem, I write out the law of sines. So I write out sine of A over A equals sine B over B equals sine C over C. In my picture, I'm going to draw in the information that they give me. So I'm going to say the measure of angle A is 55. So I'm going to draw this in here. This is 55. The measure of angle B is 50. And side little c is 71. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, all right, I know that angle A is 55. I'm going to write the information above my formula. Angle B is 50. That goes here. And side C is 71. So you might... And what we're doing when we're solving with the law of sines, we're going to be using a proportional relationship. So basically you need one proportion full. You need both numbers in either this, angle C side C, angle B side B, or angle A side A. So the first thing I do is I look here and say, well, shoot, doesn't look like I have all the information. But I can solve for this angle right here because I know that all angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. So this angle right here is 180 minus 55 minus 50. So that's going to give me 180 minus 105 is going to give me 75. So this angle right here is going to be 75. Now I have a complete ratio with information, and I can use, now I'm going to use ratios or proportions to solve for my missing sides. It doesn't matter which side I solve for first. So I'm going to solve and try to find little b first. So I'm going to use this proportion. So I'm going to write out the sine of 50 over b is equal to the sine of 75 over 71. Okay, when I solve a proportion, I'm going to cross multiply. I'm just going to move this up a little bit so I don't run out of space here. Okay, so I'm going to cross multiply, so I multiply this and I multiply this. So I get 71 times the sine of 50 is equal to b times the sine of 75. Now you have to remember that the sine of 75, this comes together like this. You can't just have the sine of nothing. And the sine of 50 is a number. So you have to remember that that is like a group, okay? It comes together. You can't split it apart. All right, so I need to get the b on a side by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by the sine of 75. This happens to go away, so I'm going to end up with b is equal to, and I'm going to plug this whole thing in on my calculator. You want to use a nice, I would say, calculator that you can type in everything in an easy to read mode. I would highly recommend using the Desmos Scientific Calculator. I'm just going to move this over here and kind of zoom this in so I can write. So I am typing in everything. So I'm going to hit this A over B button right underneath my wrench here. That's going to give me the fraction, and I'm typing in 71 times the sine of 50, all divided by the sine of 75. Okay, that gives me 56, and they want me to round to the nearest tenth. 56.3, that would round to the nearest tenth. Okay, so that's this side. Now I have to find my A. So I'm going to use the information that I have to kind of to begin with this guy, and then I'm going to use this proportion over here. So I can set this up the following way. So we're going to come over here, and I'm going to say, we'll use this pink guy right here. We're going to say that the sine of 55 over A is equal to the sine of 75 divided by 71. Again, we're going to cross multiply. So I get 71 times the sine of 55 is equal to the A times the sine of 75. And we're going to divide both sides by the sine of 75. This cancels out, so I'm left with A is equal to, and I type this whole thing just exactly the way that it is on my calculator. So I'm going to hit my fraction and do 71 times the sine of 55 divided by the sine of 75 gives me, round to the nearest tenth, so 60.2. Okay, so I would come over here and I would write 60.2 here. A lot of times they're going to have you like write out all your answers. So you would say, like up here, that little a is equal to 60.2, just so your answers are organized. Little b is equal to 56.3, and angle C is equal to 75, just so we have all of our answers in kind of one area. Okay, so there's my first problem. Next example. We're going to write out try to solve for the missing pieces, and I'm going to draw all the information I have in my picture. So the measure of angle A is 70, the measure of angle B is also 70, and little a is going to be this side, 10. Okay, so I'm going to write all the information that I have here. So angle A is 70, angle B is 70, side little a is 10. Okay, so perfect. So right away I have a complete ratio on this one, so that's good. Again, I can find this missing angle because I know all angles in a triangle are 180 degrees. So this is going to be 180 minus 70 minus 70, or 180 minus 140 is going to give me a 40-degree angle. And I'm going to we'll solve these two first. Actually, let's draw it this way. I'm going to use these two to find my side B. So we'll write this up here. we're going to say that the sine of 70 over 10 is equal to the sine of 70 over the b. Okay, and I'm going to cross multiply here and here, so I get b times the sine of 70 is equal to 10 times the sine of 70. Now, you might be pretty slick and happen to say, well, obviously these have to match, but if we're going to mathematically solve this, we're going to divide both sides by the sine of 70. And you can go ahead and use your calculator here, though you might not need to use it because if you recognize the sine of 70 over the sine of 70 will cancel each other out. It will be equal to 1. So we can say that b is equal to 10. Which makes sense. This side should also be 10 because my angles on the bottom are the same. So this is going to be a 10 here. And now we're going to use this and this to find my side little c. So I'm going to come over here. We'll say that the sine of 70 over 10 is equal to the sine of 40 over c. We're going to cross multiply. So I have c times the sine of 70 is equal to 10 times the sine of 40. We're going to divide both sides by the sine of 70. And one thing I forgot to mention is on this calculator, you can see kind of over here, this button that I'm pushing where it says deg and rad. You want to make sure that your calculator is in deg mode, which stands for degrees. The rad is another way that we measure angles, which is called radians. And if you have your calculator in radians mode, you will get the answers wrong no matter what. So make sure that your calculator is in degree mode. If you don't know how to determine that, you want to look for the button that says deg or rad. Most of the time, if your calculator is in degree mode, it'll either say deg or it won't say anything at all. But if your calculator is in radian mode, you should see a rad somewhere on the screen. Okay, so I'm going to type this in. I'm going to hit my fraction button. And I'm going to take 10 times the sine of 40 divided by the sine of 70. And that's going to tell me we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so 6.8. So this is going to be 6.8. And then you would want to come up here. And we would write down all of our information. We would say that little b is equal to 10, little c is equal to 6.8, and angle C is equal to 40. Just so I have all of my information organized, degrees. Okay, last problem. Okay, so on here, I'm gonna again draw in my information and find all the missing pieces. So here it tells me that little c is 61, so that's gonna be this side over here. It tells me that little a is 36, that's gonna be, whoops, this side right here. And measure of angle C is 31. And then I'm going to put it also in my formula. So little c is 61, little a is 36, and angle C is 31. Okay, so now here, this gives us some different information. Here I already have a complete ratio, but they gave me another side instead of an angle, so I have to find the angle. So this is a teeny bit different. We will start with A because we have no information for B, so the only place I can start is A. So I'm going to say that, we'll do it in this color, that the sine of A over 36 is equal to the sine of 31 over 61. Okay, again, same concept. I'm going to cross multiply. So I have 61 times the sine of A is equal to 36 times the sine of 31. Okay, so like we were talking earlier, the sine of the angle is like a group. You cannot split it up. So I have to solve for A. So in order to do that, first thing I have to do is get rid of the 61. So this leaves me with the sine of A is equal to 36 times the sine of 31 over 61. Okay, so if I get my calculator out, I have, okay, so I'm going to enter this in. I have 36 times the sine of 31 divided by 61. Okay. When we're solving for an angle, it's important that the answer that we get for this part, where we write the sine of A equals, whatever this number is, needs to be between -1 and +1. Because if you look at the sine graph, it oscillates, which means it goes up and down and it repeats itself. And the biggest y value you can have is 1, and the smallest y value you can have is -1. Okay, so that's important that our answer is between -1 and +1. So this gives me 0.30395. 30395. Now I didn't round this to the nearest tenth. This is called an intermediate computation, which means I'm using my calculator to find what I'm ultimately trying to find. So we don't want to round to the nearest tenth and then round to the nearest tenth, or we'll get what's called a rounding error, and your answer could actually be incorrect. So carry it out at least 3 or 4 decimal places. I try to usually use 4. That's pretty safe. Okay. Now, but my angle is still not on a side by itself, so how do I solve for A? Again, we can't just divide by sine because this has to be the sine of something. So we're going to do what's called the inverse. We're going to take the inverse of both sides like this. The inverse cancels out the function here, so I end up with A is equal to the inverse sine of 0.30395. Okay. Now on your calculator, this calculator, you have to hit function and you have to find the inverse. And instead of typing in everything on the bottom, there's this button that says ANS, and it pulls my answer from my last entry, so I don't have to retype everything. So I end up with an answer of 17.695, which if I round that to the nearest tenth, it will give me 17.7 degrees. Okay, great. So now I come back here and I figure out that this is 17.7 degrees. Okay, and I'm also going to draw this in my triangle just because we have to also find this angle here. And we know that all angles in a triangle add up to 180. So this angle is 180 minus 31 minus 17.7, which I don't know that off the top of my head. So use your calculator. So I'm going to say 180 minus 17.7 minus 31 gives me 131.3. Which is this angle here. Okay. Now I have to find my side B, so I'm going to use these. You always want to try to use the information that they give you as much as you can to solve for all pieces of a problem, because if you happen to make a mistake in your calculations, you don't want to use a wrong answer to then find something else, because that means your answer would be wrong again. So always try to use all the information they give you if possible. It's not always going to be the case, but just it's like a good method of practice. Okay, so for this next part to solve, we'll do this in pink. I'm going to say that the sine of 131.3 over B is equal to the sine of 31 over 61. Okay, again, we're going to cross multiply. So I end up with 61 times the sine of 131.3 is equal to B times the sine of 31. And I'm going to divide both sides by the sine of 31. This cancels out, and type this whole thing in my calculator. So I'm going to do my fraction here and type 61 times the sine of 131.3, all divided by the sine of 31. Gives me 88.97, rounds all the way up to 89. So 89.0 would be round to the nearest tenth. So this is 89.0, and then you would come up here, and we would say that angle A we found to be 17.7. We found angle B to be 131.3. And what are we missing? Oh, and side B. Side B is 89.0. Okay, so let me know if you have any questions. Again, I think it's really beneficial if you just write out the law of sines every time, just like this. So that way you can write out the information and know what ratios you're using in order to set up your proportion to solve. Let me know if you have any questions. Good luck.